a hydro dam just waiting there, and it's a heat bank just waiting there. Just so while we're on Spain, first I'll give you the German story about solar. In 2 weeks, in the 12 days of Christmas, the Germans on their, in the middle of winter when it drops below zero, on their Christmas holidays they installed 3,000 megawatts of rooftop PV. So 3,000 megawatts of photovoltaic. Sorry, no, they didn't. 1,500. They did 3,000 in a month. 3,000 in December. They did 1,500 megawatts in 2 weeks. Okay, and this is the Christmas period. Christmas holidays, minus 0 degree temperatures. 1,500 megawatts. Now, for context, across all of Australia, we have about 1,250 megawatts of PV to date. That's for all time. And the Germans stamped out more than that in 2 weeks. In fact, even if you take the government's commitment to build the solar flagships projects, they still built more PV than what we've got installed, plus the hollow announcement for solar flagships. So what we're doing here is really window dressing. It's pathetic, and we need to pull our socks up. So that's where we're at. So this is also on fast trains. We're heavily dependent on fossil fuel imports. When it comes to transportation fuels, we're getting 50% of our oil is imported, and that's going to rise to 80% by 2015. So 2015 will be in the same position the United States is in, when we're heavily dependent on oil imports. I'd say we're already heavily dependent. That means that we have to be linked to the international price. China and India sucking up more and more oil resources they grow, along with Brazil and Russia, and there isn't that much more easy oil to get, so the prices just steadily climb. So the Spanish know this, because they're 100% oil importers, and this is what they've done about it. They've installed over 2,600 kilometres of very fast trains, and they've got another 7,000 kilometres on the way. And if you go to Spain, you'll see that there's a fast train line being built everywhere, and they're all coming to completion. And they've got a program from 2004 to 2020, a $150 billion program. So instead of spending hundreds of billions of dollars of importing oil, they get all their people's money, and they spend hundreds of billions of dollars, well, 150 billion, building electrified rail. So they've got a program for 18 of their biggest cities, and to have metros and light rail systems, and they're getting rolling them out comprehensively. And they've got this fast train program, which gets fast train station within 30 minutes of 90% of the population. And we can do it too. Our population distribution is basically along the coast and quite linear. And I'll give you some comparison. Australia has 22 million people, Spain has 46 million. Australia is 16 times larger than Spain. You can see Spain just here. Australia has 7.7 million square kilometres and Spain has 500,000 square kilometres. Australia has the same demand of electricity. So we're obviously busy using electricity. Effectively using twice as much per person. We use 35% less oil in Spain, but not per person. We use 35% less oil. So in other words, we're using a lot more oil per person in Australia. And in 2008, we had 45% oil imports at a cost of $20 billion at that high price, when it spiked to $147.50 a barrel. So $20 billion of oil imports. Spain was importing $80 billion at that point in time. So you imagine if Spain hadn't embarked on their electrification programs, their huge rail programs. Madrid has metros everywhere, Barcelona, they would have been importing the kind of oil that we're using, and they would have already been, that's already dividend. It's $20 billion, $30 billion, $40 billion worth of oil that the Spanish didn't import, so that's dividend for them installing rail. So if we start to install rail now, we'll be paying dividend because we use Australian money at home rather than using it to pay somebody else to produce oil in the Middle East or in South America or wherever the oil is coming from via Singapore. So we can choose to invest our money with us for the long term to build rail corridors that last for hundreds of years. And I'll tell you, when you're shooting along the Spanish railway, you look out the window every so often and you see an aqueduct. That was put there by the Romans, still solid, still working, cuts through just like the railway does, cuts through the mountains, comes out the other side. The aqueduct is raised up, and that's just how the fast trains are. They just cut through the mountain. And that corridor, once it's built, will be there to serve our children, our grandchildren, our great-grandchildren, and till the end of the time, basically. So very low operations and maintenance costs. It's all in the corridor. So we should be building corridor right now while we can, make hay like the sun shines, and make things good. So this gives you an idea. The 2011 Spain had 2,700 megawatts of track, kilometres. Sorry, 2,700 kilometres of track. They actually have almost 3,000 now, so that's a bit out of date. Sorry about that. Things change all the time. It's almost 3,000 k of track. So high-speed rail to be within 30 minutes of Spain's population. That's 90%. And where would Australia be on a per capita basis? So if we had the same amount of rail today as them, so the same 4 centimetres of track per person, right? So 40 millimetres of track per person. We'd have 1,332 kilometres. Newcastle, Sydney, Melbourne, Geelong, Ballarat, and Brisbane, Gold Coast, Byron Bay. A little branch line out to Ipswich. I'm sure I could get that in there. I mean, you're already a commuter town, so you can commute in 15 rather than 30 an hour. So that's definitely the way to do things. There's a job for your council. By 2020, we'd have, and I've upped this by a couple of hundred just so it fits the nice route, 5,600 kilometres. We have Perth to Adelaide, Melbourne, Sydney, Brisbane, Townsville, and then once we finish that, we do a nice little shortcut between Sydney and Adelaide and so on. So the scopes there have a rapid, fast rail that's as efficient as getting around as in planes, and it's much more comfortable. You're not sort of tied to your seat like a prisoner, and you can use the internet, and everything's comfortable. Restaurants and dining and tables, and yeah, very comfortable. And doing now up to 400 kilometres an hour, so we could get 350 kilometre fast trains installed here. And the beauty is that all the heavy lifting on the technology has been done by the French, the Germans, and the Spanish, and the cost reductions have been done for us by the Chinese. So they put the price pressure on, as they've already rolled out 10,000 kilometres of fast train networks in China, and they've done it since 2005. So just in 6 years, we've stamped out 10,000 kilometres, and they're aiming for another 10,000 kilometres by 2015. Solar photovoltaic, rooftop solar. So today there's 50 gigawatts of global manufacturing capacity, but last year only 29 gigawatts is installed. So it's a bit of overcapacity in production, but we could be deploying all that excess capacity. The fit in Germany is very successful. Now, I wrote this at the end of last year and I said 22 gigawatts in Germany at the end of 2011, but then they installed 3,000 megawatts in December. So the figure now is 25 gigawatts. Now, on a quiet day in Australia, the entire Australian demand is 25 gigawatts. So if you can imagine that 25 gigawatts in Germany, of which 8 of it was put up this year, or 7.5 was. If you imagine that on roofs in Australia, on a sunny day across the nation, well, we've got enough power to roughly run the country. We have to have some spinning reserve and so on, but basically that's how much power production. And not only that, we get between 30 and 30% of double the amount of electricity out of solar photovoltaic panels versus Germany. So it's that whole buy one get one free thing again. It's cheaper for us to do. It's easier for us to do, so we should just get on and do it. Australia matched. If we had matched Germany, instead of having 1.25 gigawatts on roofs at the moment, we'd have 6. And with 6 gigawatts on roofs, the time of production is the time when the power prices go highest in the market. It would actually eliminate 85% of high price events. It's called the merit order effect. And what it means is that paying people to put panels on their roofs actually saves more money in the wholesale market than the cost of funding the feed-in tariff to put them on roofs. It's called the merit order effect. So the wealth transfer is not from the poor pensioner to the person who has solar panels on their roofs. The wealth transfer is from the old, outdated, dirty fossil fuel plants to the person who puts panels on their roofs. And now, because panels have become so cheap, you actually don't need to pay the person to put panels on their roofs as much as it's worth. You can actually suppress the wholesale power price more than the cost of funding people to get them to put it on their roofs, and deliver a dividend to the whole community. So smear the saving across all consumers. So we actually have lower electricity bills if we roll out more and more PV. And that certainly happens in the first 4,000 or 5,000 megawatts you get out there. It really eliminates those needing to spin up those gas peaker plants in the last hydro dam. And it means that the coal guys who drum their chest and say, we can produce for $40 a megawatt hour, we're such cheap producers, chest thump, chest thump, chest thump. But then they sit there and they are allowed to make $12,500 a megawatt hour, not the $40 a megawatt hour they skied about. They're allowed to make $12,500 a megawatt hour on a peak day when everyone's got their air conditioner on. It's not just the last gas peaker that goes into the market. Everyone for that hour gets repriced. And so the big money making is in whoever has the hedge contract, which is sold off for that coal-fired power plant, so that huge amount of money trades in the spot market. For example, in New South Wales, if everyone has their air conditioners on, big hot day, $187 million worth of power can get traded when 15,000 megawatts is in use. So we're doing $187 million. PV knocks out 85% of those kind of events. The events above $300 a megawatt hour. And $300 a megawatt hour is an important price point because in Europe, their power market doesn't skyrocket above $300 a megawatt hour ever. They call that a high price. In Australia, we go quietly along on a quiet day at $30, $40, $50, $60 a megawatt hour, and then suddenly we're at $200, then $300, then $1,000, then $5,000, and then $10,000, then $12,500. They've hit the price cap. They're not allowed to charge anymore. They're actually lobbying right now so they can go to $16,000 a megawatt hour, which means our power bills go up, all because they're provisioning gas plant, which they can game the market with, because they can artificially reduce these high prices. Because if you own like 4 generators and there's a heat wave, you can just, whoops, that one tripped off, and no one can audit that they didn't do that, and then the other 3, they make way more money than having 4 generating, because they could have had 4 generating at $300 a megawatt hour, but now they can have 3 generating at $10,000 a megawatt hour. And so that's the game. And the beauty of photovoltaic is that the customer in their house doesn't know how to game the electricity market. They just have their PV system installed, it's dumb, it's facing the grid, and it's injecting that power no matter what, so it's suppressing the wholesale power price. It's called the merit order effect. Remember it, and whenever you hear any rubbish that the poor are subsidising PV on the roofs, actually PV is lowering wholesale power prices and can lower wholesale power prices more than the cost of paying people to put panels on their roofs. And actually the whole story was made up by AGL. AGL wrote a paper, a Dodge paper, that they distributed amongst ACOS members, so social services organisations like St Vinny's and Brotherhood, and they call it socialising the paper, and they got them all to believe that the poor of Western Sydney were subsidising the rich of Vaucluse to put panels on the roofs. But actually the poor AGL with its poor gas and coal plant was subsidising the person to put, or they were actually not knowing how to, they weren't forecasting what's going to happen in the market, so they're a loser in a modern market which includes PV. There's no way I can play the market as a rooftop panel, someone has rooftop panels, and get $12.50 a kilowatt hour. So it's quite reasonable for us to get an averaged feed-in tariff to take advantage of the benefit we provide to the market, which is the wholesale price suppression. I'll probably go through wind. If we had the same amount of wind as Spain, we'd have 10,000 megawatts, but we've got a quarter of that. And if we had 10,000 megawatts of wind, it would also have a merit order effect, and we'd be significantly on the way to having 20% of our power from wind. We're bringing out the buildings plan. I can tell you about renewable ambient heat, which you probably haven't heard about. That's heat energy in the atmosphere outside, and you use an air conditioner in reverse to trap it. So it's like a solar panel. The solar panel is trapping the sun's direct radiation. A heat pump, which is a reverse cycle air conditioner, is trapping the sun's delayed solar radiation, delayed stored energy in the environment. So the heat from the sun is stored in the concrete and in the earth and in the trees, and you can actually pump that into your house. And they work in a way that you get 80% of your heat from outside and 20% from the electricity grid to drive the pump.